Hello.
That's loud.
It works.
I mean, you never know how loud it's going to be until you try.
Yeah.
Hello.
Are we good? This meeting of the Community Development Board is called to order on April 16th, 2024. Welcome, everyone. I would ask that you please join me in our Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. This board consists of 7 members and 1 alternate who are appointed by City Council and serve voluntarily. I am John Quattrocchi, and I will ask the other members and staff to introduce themselves, beginning on my left.
Andy Park. O'Bray Poacher Court.
Kurt Heinrichs.
Jay Daniel, attorney for the board.
Rosemary Call, City Clerk. Lauren Matzke, Planning and Development.
Matthew Minich, Assistant City Attorney.
Gina Clayton, Planning and Development.
Diane Achinelli.
Andrew Hupp.
Michael Butsikas.
Please remember to turn off your cell phones so that they do not become a distraction during the meeting. Please also refrain from having conversations in this room so that we might hear all the testimony given today. To ensure a complete record of this board's actions, we ask that each individual wishing to speak, including the applicant, speak into the microphone at the podium in front of us. Clearly state and spell your name for the clerk. I will ask all those in attendance today who plan to speak to please rise now and be sworn in by the clerk. Agendas of today's meeting are on the podium to your left near the entry door. Also on this podium are a roster of the Community Development Board, the list of city staff experts, and their resumes, the board's rules of procedure, and the annual schedule of the board. Our first order of business is to review and approve the minutes from last month's meeting. Do I have a motion for approval of the minutes?
A motion to approve the minutes of the last meeting.
Second.
All those in favor? Aye. Opposed? Thank you. At this time, there's an opportunity for citizens to be heard. Is there any person wishing to address the board concerning any matter that's not on today's agenda? Seeing none. We'll then go on. We have a couple cases for requests for continuance. Our first case is case FLD 2015-11046A at 405 and 415 Island Way. The owner is Azure Development Group, LP. The applicant is Terry Skapik, Woods Consulting. Is there a motion to continue this meeting to this case till May of 2024? Do I have a motion?
I make a motion to continue it until May.
Is there a second?
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Item 2, case FLD 2024-01001 at 1091 El Dorado Avenue. The owner is Carlwell Yacht Club. The applicant is Tina Underwood and Albert Carrier, Trans Systems. Do I have a motion to continue this case till May 2024?
I move to continue this case to May 21, 2024.
Is there a second?
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Thank you. At this time, we'll go on to consent. The board has adopted a consent agenda format. The consent items are identified as such on the agenda. Consent agenda items are those items for which the Planning and Development Department recommends approval. The applicant is in agreement with any proposed conditions, and no written objections to the case have been received to date. Items may be removed from the consent agenda today by a member of the board, a member of the staff, or any person in the audience for questions or objections. I will read each item on the consent agenda, and if any person wishes to remove this item from the consent agenda, please so state or raise your hand, and we will remove it from the consent agenda. Item removed from the consent agenda will be heard in the regular order of the meeting. Items that remain on the consent agenda will be approved with a single vote as to each type of hearing. First case, FLD 2024-01003 at 375 Turner Street. The owner is the First United Methodist Church of Clearwater, Inc. The applicant is Kriker Kazarjian, Gulf Coast Consulting. 0.257 acres located on the south side of Turner Street, approximately 334 feet west of South Fort Harrison. Requesting flexible development approval to construct a medical clinic in the institutional district for the property as a comprehensive infill redevelopment project. The project proposes to utilize an existing building and request flexibility for parking and landscaping. The signed planner is James Baker. Does anyone wish to have this item removed from consent? Seeing none. Item 2, case FLD 2021-12023 at 605 Palm Bluff Street. The owner is Palm Bluff Development Group, LLC. The applicant is Norm Novitsky, managing member of Palm Bluff, LLC. A 2.162 acres bound by Palm Bluff Street North, Blanche B. Littlejohn Trail on the east, Cedar Street on the south, and North Garden Avenue on the west. Requesting a 1-year development order time extension for 84 attached dwelling units and 5,000 square feet of non-residential development in the downtown and commercial zoning districts, originally approved by the Community Development Board on May 17th, 2022. The signed planner is Gina Clayton. Does anyone wish to have this item removed from consent? Items number 1 and number 2 remain on consent. Does any board member wish to disclose any ex parte communication of either of these two cases? No? May I have a motion of approval for the 2 items remaining on consent today, level 2?
I move to approve case items 1 and 2 on the consent agenda. Case number is FLD 2024-01003 and case number FLD 2021-12023. Based on the evidence in the record, including the application and staff report, and hereby adopt the findings of fact and conclusions of law stated in the staff reports with conditions of approval as listed.
Do I have a second?
Second.
All those in favor? Aye. Opposed? Thank you. The next item on consent is a level 3. It's case TA 2024-03001. Amendments to the Community Development Code. Excuse me. The applicant is the City of Clearwater Planning and Development Department, requesting amendments to the Community Development Code to provide for accessory dwelling units in certain residential zoning districts, to provide additional standards for car washes, to establish standards for solar energy systems and density bonuses for the use of gray water systems, to update mechanical screening requirements, to remove outdated requirements related to concurrency, to update standards for traffic impact studies, to require a notice of application for level 2 cases prior to the Development Review Committee meeting, and various other formatting and editorial clarifications. The signed planner is Kyle Brotherton. Does anyone wish to have this item removed from today's consent? Yep.
Mr. Kutraki, we realized a last-minute change we wanted to make in one of the definitions that's proposed, a one-word change, so I think maybe we should pull it off consent to ask you to incorporate that change.
So we'll just do it in the regular course of the meeting? Can we do that today? Any opinion, Jay? We're good?
Yep.
Okay, so item 3 is off consent. We'll now go on to the regular agenda. Cases today will be level 3 cases on today's consent. All level 3 cases, such as a plan amendment, rezoning, or development agreement, are considered legislative hearings. The Community Development Board reviews the application, the staff report, correspondence, and all the evidence presented today and makes a recommendation to City Council. For level 3 applications, the City Council makes the final decision. The procedures for all level 3 cases are as follows. Presentation by planning staff, 10 minutes. Presentation by the applicant, 10 minutes. Comments by the public. Closing remarks by the planning and development staff. Closing remarks by the applicant. Closing of the public hearing. Discussion and vote by the board. Our first level 3 case today is the one we just read. Doesn't matter which order we go, we're doing.
Yeah, you'll need to do the one that's pulled off consent first.
Okay.
You do?
So,
Okay.
case TA 2024-03001, amendments to the Community Development Code. We don't need-
Just a clarification, do you want the whole presentation since we pulled it off, or just the change that we would like to make to a
I
definition?
think the change
If
would
it's
be
pulled
fine.
off, I would do the full presentation.
Really? Okay.
Understanding it's just one word.
Kyle.
Sorry, Kyle, I got mine on. I was anxious.
All right, thank you. Connor Brotherton, Planning and Development. So the case before you today is case TA 2024-03001, amendment to the Community Development Code. So before I get into the presentation, just for the record, to keep it clear, when this was advertised for our Development Review Committee meeting on April 4th of 2024, staff was proposing the addition of electric vehicle parking requirements, as well as updates to the city's mobility management system. However, after that meeting, staff has pulled those two proposed additions. The electric vehicle parking requirements have been pulled due to Senate Bill 1084 of this legislative session in 2024. That Senate bill actually preempts electric vehicle parking station standards to the state. And then also, we've realized that Fort Pinellas and Pinellas County are going to be initiating a project to actually update the mobility management system and multimodal impact fee. So at this time, we feel it's best to remove that from this proposed ordinance and wait, so we're not duplicating efforts. And then with that, I'll get into the overall objectives of this proposed ordinance. So the first and probably the largest piece of this is the establishment of accessory dwelling units as a permitted use in certain zoning districts. We're also going to be addressing some sustainability initiatives, that would be the solar energy systems. We're also going to address statutory changes from the past couple of years. As mentioned, we're also going to be adding level 2 cases, FLD cases, to the notice of application prior to development review committee meetings. And we also have additional amendments that are really meant to clean up and reorganize the development code to make it a little bit easier to read and that provide more clarity. So the first major item of this is accessory dwelling units in the establishment. So we're proposing to establish accessory dwelling units as a level 1 FLS staff level review in the low density residential, low medium density residential, and medium density residential zoning districts. This use currently exists under our commercial, tourist, downtown, office, institutional, and industrial research and technology districts. So with those zoning districts, we're going to create a couple additional flexibility criteria, as well as amend that use name from accessory dwelling to accessory dwelling unit to be more in conformance with the rest of the code. We're exempting the accessory structure standards in Article 3. This would be for location, so it can't be between the principal right-of-way and the principal structure, and also the height. If the attached ADU is attached to the principal structure, it can go up to 30 feet, which would be the maximum permitted height. And then likewise with their accessory structures, anything that is detached on the detached accessory dwelling unit could have a height from 15 to 20 feet, and that would go through the flexibility process. And then also we are updating the definition of accessory dwelling. So in your ordinance is what we advertise it as currently. But yesterday afternoon we did a quick update. As mentioned, it was very minor. However, the new definition reads as this. Dwelling unit accessory means a secondary dwelling unit that exists either within the same structure or on the same lot as a detached dwelling or a non-residential use. Mobile homes and recreational vehicles shall not be used as accessory dwelling units. So the big change there was secondary living to secondary dwelling. We just have a couple of quick examples of some accessory dwelling units. So this is a very quick sketch of accessory dwelling and how it could be placed on a 5,000 square foot lot, which is our minimum standard size for residential lots in our low medium density residential district, which just happens to be the largest residential district that we have in the city. So what you see here is the front setback of 25 feet, side setbacks of 5 feet, and a rear setback of 10 feet. And with our accessory dwelling units, the maximum square footage is based off of the gross floor area of the principal structure. So in this example here, the principal structure is 1,295 square feet in gross floor area, which means that the maximum accessory dwelling unit size could be 647 feet. So this example here is just a couple feet less than that maximum could be. And then this is just an example of an attached accessory dwelling unit. This is one example of how that could be accomplished. And the second sketch here, same lot size, but this shows a detached accessory dwelling unit. So that area off to the right that's in blue, that is one of our flexibility standards for a detached dwelling unit, detached accessory dwelling unit. Whereas the minimum standard is 10 feet, we're proposing that a detached accessory dwelling unit could go to 5 feet. And that is in line with our accessory structures code as currently written. But the front setback and side setbacks would remain the same. And again, that maximum size in this case would be 647 square feet, whereas shown as 644. The maximum size for an accessory dwelling unit in general is 750 square feet, or 50% of the principal structure, whichever is less. So for example, if you had a 2,000 square foot principal structure, you could do up to 750 square feet. Anything less would be 50% of that principal structure. And then again, here's just an example of a detached accessory dwelling unit. Some of our sustainability initiatives. So this is where we are proposing to establish development standards for roof-mounted and floating solar systems. Floating solar facilities are actually required by statutes now. That was House Bill 1411, I believe, of 2022. And with this, we're adding 6 new definitions to account. It's photovoltaic panels, racking equipment, which would be any of the equipment that these solar systems are installed on, a solar energy system in general, solar energy system floating to account for the floating solar energy system, roof-mounted. Some of our legislative changes, floating solar kind of falls under that and sustainability. But in addition, we are proposing to establish density bonuses for gray water systems, and that was through Senate Bill 64 of 2021. Those density bonuses would be 25% or 35%, and that would account for how many units in your development has gray water installed. So this would be for any single family or attached multifamily development of 25 units or more. And to achieve that 25% bonus, 75% of those dwelling units have to have gray water systems installed. And for the 35% bonus, 100% of those dwelling units would have a gray water system installed. And one caveat to this is that if you're doing this for an attached multifamily development, that development cannot be over 5 stories tall, and that is straight out of the state statutes. So with this, we're also creating 2 definitions, one for black water and one for gray water, so that those are defined and easily understood. We're also proposing to update temporary emergency housing standards. That was from Senate Bill 250 in 2023. That's really a small change. It ups the time limit that a residential property could have temporary emergency housing on it up to 36 months. And that would be time of CO or as long as that homeowner is making substantial progress on getting their principal structure up to date. And then we're also proposing to delete certificates of concurrency and capacity. These are no longer required in the state statute. The city actually had no process to achieve one of these certificates. And state statutes for concurrency are very clear that any sort of concurrency must be met during the time of site plan review, and that's what we do. So our staff will review any development proposal, and they'll ensure that adequate public facility levels of service exist. And if not, they'll work with the developer to ensure that those get fixed. This is a small change, but one that we're hoping will allow residents and neighborhood associations a little bit greater time for cases that come before you at the CDB. So we're going to be requiring level 2 applications or FLD applications to be noticed prior to a DRC meeting after their applications are deemed complete. whereas currently we only do that for level 1 flexible standard development applications. So it should give the public a little bit more time to be aware of what's coming down the pipeline. And then some additional amendments. This is really to clean up the code a little bit. So we're reformatting certain tables. Within that, we're also going to be removing residential infill project footnotes. Those footnotes currently provide for additional flexibility for residential infill uses. However, that additional flexibility standards, it's not defined anywhere else. And also other uses in the code do not have this footnote that provides that extra flexibility. So this will bring consistency between all of the uses. We're removing outdated references to Clearwater 2045. That's our new comprehensive plan, which was recently adopted. There are numerous mentions of outdated policies or maps that no longer exist. For the commercial district, we're adding 2 new flexibility criteria for car washes, and this is really just to get us in line with industry standards and how car washes have changed over the years. We're moving references to the 1999 Airport Master Plan, and we're just going to amend that to say the Airport Master Plan as amended. And the next 2 slides will show updates to 2 fence graphics. So this fence graphic is for open style or non-opaque style fences. And the main addition here is the note that the minimum spacing must be 2 inches between slats and pickets. And we also have that dimension in there as well. And then for this one, this is the double frontage fence graphic. And what we've done here is we've added rear to above and below the parcel lines to denote where the rear of the property would be, as well as the side property line. This would be based on where your property is addressed from, which in this case is on the right-hand side. That would be the addressed property. So we're hoping that this will make it a little bit clearer for applicants to come in to understand where they can put their fences. So additional amendments, we're updating our accessory uses to be 25% of the gross floor area of the principal structure. This is actually currently for accessory structures, it's 25%. This change was meant to be done a couple amendments ago, but it was inadvertently missed, so we're updating that now to be consistent between accessory uses and accessory structures. We've revised mechanical equipment screening requirements, and what we've done is we've used our downtown mechanical equipment screening requirements and just brought those over into the rest of the development code for properties throughout the city. We've also amended the sidewalks and front setbacks to be up to 48 inches, whereas currently they can be up to 42 inches. And this is really from a staff level initiative when reviewing site plan applications. We're also proposing to allow the city engineer to some flexibility in determining site visibility triangle distances. This would be as needed case-by-case basis should there be certain site constraints. And then we're also proposing to revise our affordable housing density bonus to a level 1 FLS approval, whereas currently it is a level 2 FLD approval. And this is really to make that process a little bit easier and have a staff level approval. And then lastly, we're exempting city banner program banners from sign regulations. And just to note, we are currently working on creating that sign banner program. And we've also revised the traffic impact study, just to provide clarification on what would be required, when it would be required. We've also added AM to peak hours. For definitions, outside of the definitions that we've previously went over, we're amending coastal storm area, and this is due to Clearwater 2045. We're removing an outdated policy reference and map reference. We've established a dog daycare definition. We've had a lot of inquiries into this definition, so this will provide clarity going forward. We are creating a mechanical equipment definition. However, this definition already exists under the accessory structures section of the code. It's within mechanical equipment. However, most of our definitions, or most of our uses are within the definition, so this is a consistency item. We're amending non-residentially zoned property to remove the mixed use or MU district from that definition. The city does not have a mixed use zoning district. We are amending retail sales and services to include dog daycare as a permitted use. And we're also creating a definition for shipping containers. This actually came up at one of our open houses for accessory dwelling units. So this falls in line with accessory dwelling units. And under this, we would permit a shipping container to be used as an accessory dwelling unit, provided it can meet all building and fire codes. And then the criteria for text amendments, it has to be consistent with the comprehensive plan, and as detailed in your staff report, we've noted that it is consistent and furthers a comprehensive plan. And also as detailed in your staff report, it furthers the purpose of the community development code. And the DRC, Development Review Committee, reviewed this application at its April 4th, 2024 meeting, recommended approval, and staff is also recommending your approval of this ordinance. I'd be happy to answer any questions.
You mentioned Blackwater versus Clearwater. Where is that referenced in this?
So those would be under definitions. So section 24,
Page
which
41.
begins on page 41. And Blackwater is part of the domestic sewage carried off by toilets, urinals, and kitchen drains. Whereas gray water is domestic sewage that is not black water. So that's why we included Blackwater. And that would be waste from bath, lavatory, laundry, and sink, except for kitchen sink waste.
You got another question?
One last question. It was for the accessory dwelling unit.
Yes.
If you go street to street, do you have criteria written in the code to allow for a rear yard? If it's on a public street, front and back, is there a definition for that?
So you're talking like a through lot or a double frontage lot?
Yeah.
So that actually came up last week at our open house, and we just did not have time to actually incorporate that. So we are going to do some research into that. As we're going forward, we do have another set of amendments that we'll be bringing forward later this year. So that's where that would be included.
Got it. Thank you.
Yeah, you're welcome.
How does the definition change of living to dwelling change the interpretation?
Can you speak up?
How does the change of living to dwelling change the interpretation of that?
I can actually answer that. So the intention with that change is to make sure we protect our short-term rental prohibition. As you may be aware, in 2011, the Florida statutes changed where we weren't allowed to prohibit short-term rentals, but since we had our code in place before that date, we're allowed to continue to prohibit short-term rentals in residential zoning districts. We wanted to make sure by calling it a dwelling that we make sure that these accessory dwelling units that are going to be in the residential zoning districts, you can't short-term rental them out. So,
Okay. That was my next follow-up question. Does that have to do with VRBOs and that sort of thing?
Not to get into too much detail, but you mentioned some additional standards for car washes. Do you
Yes.
recall what they are?
Yes.
I didn't see that back.
Here. Okay, so on page 18 of your ordinance, would be number 6 and 7. So the first one relates to tunnels. So tunnels associated with car washes shall be located parallel to the abutting street. And that's due, we don't want anyone to be driving down and look down the tunnel of a car wash.
Correct.
And the second one, number 7, is vacuums and similar equipment accessory to car washes shall be applicable side and rear setbacks, consist of muted colors, and shall not be placed between the principal structure and the right-of-way. So this falls in line with our accessory structures as currently written, but this wasn't really properly defined anywhere, and it was a little cloudy as to what would constitute that. So this would provide clarity in that regard.
And I don't want to skip over, I kind of want to bring attention to this, the requirement, because I don't think it's just minor, the requirement for a notice of application for level 2 cases.
Yes.
This is something that's come in front of us about, by doing that, you're giving this notice before the DRC, right, for clarification?
Correct.
Which is the people that are getting this written notice or this notice is going to be an extension of approximately how much time than normal than we have right now. So right now, we're 10 days before our meeting, right? Is that right?
Right, it would probably
So-
give maybe 6 weeks.
So additional 6 weeks.
Something
Yeah.
like that.
So well over a
Between
month.
4 to 6 weeks, I
Yeah.
haven't counted it up.
So well over a month in addition.
Correct.
Yeah.
And, I mean, there is a caveat with that. You never know if a case is going to move forward from from DRC to CDB and what that time frame may be, but we
Yeah.
feel that this is something that will benefit the residents. We've talked to membership of the Clearwater Neighborhoods Coalition, and I think it's a welcome change for our neighborhoods in particular.
I do commend you. It's good.
Did the zone of notification change as far as?
No.
No, it did not?
No,
Okay.
it did not.
I have a question about the tunnel, if I may. What's the difference between a restaurant drive-through that faces the street and a car wash tunnel that faces the street? Why would that be such an impact in the city's mind?
I think that we have consistent regulations for automobile-related uses such as oil change facilities and others that have the requirement that those things cannot face the street. We just wanted to clarify, because we've had discussion with car wash developers, that the same applies to the tunnel. You're seeing this mechanical equipment that's a little bit different, I think, than, where the drive-throughs are for restaurants.
Any other questions at this time? Thank you.
Thank you.
We'll now move on to just straight to comments by the public, correct, Jay? We're good with that. Same. So if anybody has any comments about this in the public, go ahead. Please state your name, clerk.
I'm Bill Johnson, president of the Clearwater Neighborhoods Coalition. You just talked about the advance notification on at the DRC. It's something that's going to make a big difference, and we appreciate staff for bringing it forward. And it seems like it's going to fit with everything else and not create a huge burden, but it'll allow us time to evaluate something that possibly might come forward, and then also, if need be, to find a professional staff person that can help us with it. So thank you very much for considering that.
I hear you. Thank you. Anybody else? None. Any closing remarks? Staff, right?
I would just ask that if you're inclined to recommend approval, you call out the amendment we've asked for you to consider as well.
We'll now close the public hearing. Discussion by vote for the board or a motion? If there's any further discussion, do I have a motion?
I motion to approve case 2020, TA 2024-0300, amendments to the Community Development Code, and its change of wording from living to dwelling. Is that right? And any other recommendations by the city staff?
Is there a second?
Second.
All those in favor? Aye. Opposed? Thank you. The next level 3 case. This case DVA 2022-06001A at 50 North Osceola and 112 South Osceola Avenue. The owner is the City of Clearwater. The applicant is the Gotham Property Acquisitions and the D'Annunzio Group. Representative is Catherine E. Cole from Hill Ward and Henderson. A 2.16 acre portion of a parcel located on the northwest corner of South Osceola Avenue and Pierce Street, and a 1.34 acre portion of a parcel located on the west side of North Osceola Avenue, approximately 370 feet north of Cleveland Street. Requesting a First Amendment to the development agreement between the City of Clearwater and Gotham Property Acquisitions LLC and the D'Annunzio Group, originally approved on August 4th, 2022. This amendment proposes a reduction in the number of dwelling units and commercial floor area proposed on the southerly development parcel, as well as other revisions related to the Fourth Amendment to the purchase and sales agreement for the property. No changes are proposed to the development approved for the northerly development parcel. Signed planner is Gina Clayton, Planning and Development Director. At this time.
Good afternoon, Gina Clayton, Planning and Development. I am going to be presenting the First Amendment to the development agreement that exists between the City of Clearwater and Gotham Property Acquisitions LLC and the D'Annunzio Group LLC that governs the two parcels that you see here that are located on the bluff. In August of 2022, the city entered into a development agreement with these groups to redevelop the former Harvard View and City Hall sites, both of which are located along Osceola Avenue, adjacent to Coachman Park, and are located in the downtown core character district of the downtown zoning district. The development agreement approved conceptual plans for both properties that include a mix of uses, including overnight accommodations, food and beverage uses, retail, residential, event space, and cultural uses. Because some of you were not here on the board when that agreement was approved, I thought it might be useful to give you an overview of what was originally approved so you have a little more context. So I'm going to start with the Harborview site, which, as you all know, is located between the entrance of Coachman Park and the main library. That's a 1.34 acre site, and it includes two buildings. The primary use will be a 158-unit hotel that's 157 feet in height, and then the other building will house commercial uses. In total, there'll be 21,000 square feet of commercial uses between the hotel and this separate building. The development includes 169 underground parking spaces. That's 119 for the hotel, which is code compliant, and an additional 50 spaces that are for use by the public. I do want to point out I had a little mistake in the staff report there. I said the height of this is 53 feet. That's actually the commercial building. The hotel is 157, and I'll correct that before it goes on to City Council. This project, as you can see, includes a lot of areas around the perimeter and through the center of the site that's going to be used for outdoor dining and public gathering, and provides public access into Coachman Park. This is a view from Coachman Park looking into the development site. And for those of you who were on the board on October 3rd of 2023, you approved the flexible development application for this project. No changes through this amendment are being made to this part of the project. The project on the former City Hall site included 500 to 600 attached dwellings, along with the typical amenities, and 40,000 square feet of commercial uses, and included things like retail, food and beverage, and cultural uses. The apartment lobby and amenities, as well as commercial space, occupied the building podium, and then the residential units, as you can see, were approved to be in two towers that were 27 stories high, or 289 feet. This approved project has a density of 253 units per acre and a FAR of 0.35. It was anticipated that this project would request 422 units from the Public Amenities Incentive Pool. This is a rendering of the building that was approved adjacent to Osceola Avenue. As you can see, there was engagement with the public there with the public plaza, a vehicular drop-off area, and then on the right side of the site was where commercial space was proposed. So since the development agreement was proposed, Gotham Property Acquisitions LLC requested the city consider a revised project. Due to the importance of this project, the city entered into discussions around changes to the project design, as well as other financial considerations of the development. To help us in these discussions, the city engaged HR&A to determine the accuracy of Gotham's financial model and assumptions, to confirm and disconfirm the extent of the financial gap claimed by Gotham, and to assess the economic and fiscal benefits that would be created by the project, so that we had a clear accounting of the cost and benefits to the city. That study confirmed the project had been negatively impacted by rapidly increasing interest rates, increases in insurance premiums, particularly after Hurricane Ian, escalating construction costs, and the findings of a geotechnical report. And the results of the negotiations are contained in the amendment that you have before you today. So the proposed amended agreement has a new design for City Hall. That project still is a mixed-use project. However, there's been some decreases in the number of residential units and the amount of commercial space that's being proposed. The number of residential rental units has been reduced to 400, and the amount of non-residential space has been reduced to 12,400 square feet. That has resulted in a density increase down to 153 units per acre, and the FAR will be 0.027. The tower remains, but only one, and it's been increased just a little bit in height to 28 stories, or 290 5 feet. And at the time of site plan review, the developers will need to come before the Community Development Board to request 211 units from the public amenities incentive pool. So there's been a little change in the approach to the parking. The code requires 1 parking space per unit. They are going to be providing 1.1 space per unit, so they'll have a total of 440 parking spaces. No parking is required for the commercial piece of the development. All the parking originally approved was underground, but due to the findings of the geotechnical reports, the cost was just too great to put both levels of parking underground. So this proposal would have 1 level underground and 1 above ground. As you can see from this slide, the site plan retains much of its original layout. However, the most notable changes are along the western property line adjacent to Coachman Park due to the changes in the parking garage design, with half of those spaces having to be above grade now. So there's also some modifications to the center of the podium. That's also being impacted by the need to have parking above ground. The reduction from 2 to 1 tower, and reduction in commercial space, especially along that western and northern side of the property. The proposed revised design, as I've said before, don't mean to be too repetitive, but we still have the large podium. We have 1 tower instead of 2, and they have really retained that modern coastal design that they started with, that uses a lot of glass, stucco, and aluminum, and clearly the building mass has been mitigated by only having 1 podium and has a very large view corridor through the site. This rendering, I think, really illustrates how similar it is to what was originally proposed. The public plaza has been retained, that circular drop-off area has been retained, as well as the commercial use closest to the street along Osceola. While you can't see this in this rendering, the garage entrance is from Pierce, and that should be visible in some of the graphics in your staff report, as well as attached to the development agreement. This rendering provides a more detailed look at the commercial area that's at the northeast corner of the site, as well as the linear plaza that's located along the north adjacent to Water's Edge. I think if you recall in the original proposal, they were calling it more of a retail corridor, but that has had to see a lot of reduction in size because of the need of parking on this ground floor. But there's also some limitations in this area site because there's a Duke Energy easement that can't be touched in any way, so they can't make any modifications in this area of the site. So this area will continue as originally proposed to provide a way for the public to go from Osceola to connect to Coachman Park, and there will be some opportunities, as you can see, for outdoor dining, retail in this area. This project will continue to meet all the obligations. Other than these changes, they are going to continue to provide a green roof, meet the LEED silver equivalent standards. They plan to incorporate LID techniques, and they will continue to have EV charging and EV-ready spaces. So the proposed amendment includes a total of 12 revisions. The amendment updates the concept plans for the City Hall site and addresses uses, density, intensity, parking, all those things that we just talked about. The agreement also supports a purchase price of $3.5 million, which is more in line with the appraised value of the property for a 400 residential rental project. The amendment also extends the project's substantial completion date from March 1st of 2026 to December 31st, 28. I do see that, it's on the next page, sorry. A new provision obligates the developer to provide liquidated damages of $1 million to the city if the project is not substantially complete by December 31st, 2028. The proposed amendment removes provisions related to the construction and funding of the pedestrian bridge that was in the original agreement. It also provides some incentives for closing on time and completing the project on time. I do want to point out, I have a typo. It's a little more than a typo. This should read, provide CRA incentive of 2.25 at substantial completion. It's just a payment. It's not tied to a date. And lastly, the proposed amendment provides for some extensions to the closing, however, requires the developer to pay the city each time they go beyond that time period. So staff believes this amendment is consistent with the comprehensive plan and the city's downtown redevelopment goals and is generally consistent with the downtown standards. Of course, we'll do a much more detailed review of the project as it moves through the site plan review process, but these conceptual plans that are being approved will guide us for the next phase when we come to a flexible development application. We think that this project still is going to create that active edge that is needed to activate Coachman Park. And the project obviously is going to provide a lot of residents in an area where we don't have many residents to better support our commercial development in downtown. There's still lots of opportunities for the public to access this site for gathering and dining and just meandering down to the park, and the design clearly does not overwhelm the park. While parking is going to be above ground part of it, it's been integrated into the design of the building, and we don't think it will overburden or visually impact the park in a negative way. Your role today is to provide City Council with a recommendation on this proposed amendment to the development agreement. Pursuant to Section 4-606 of the Community Development Code, you may recommend approval with changes or conditions of disapproval. I would like to draw to your attention, we sent you a memo yesterday. I hope you received it. If not, it should be on the desk in front of you, where we have some revised language for Section 4.12. I was a little concerned that the provision could be open to interpretation about the parking above ground that potentially could apply to this project as well as the others. So the applicant has graciously agreed to revise that, and you have that amendment in that memo. And if you are inclined to support this First Amendment, I would also ask you to make a motion to include that change, if you would, please. And Planning and Development are recommending approval, and I'd be happy to answer any questions that you may have.
Questions at this time? Anybody?
Is there any provisions to add that second building in this project at all, or is it just done?
I'm sorry.
Is there a provision in the construction of this one building if in the future they wanted to go with the second building, or is that, how would that work?
I will let the applicant answer that question. I do not think so, but I'll let them give you a definitive answer.
Relative to the valuation and then the incentives that CRA is paying them, so they're paying $3.5 million for the site, and they're essentially getting $3.5 million from CRA as well. Is that correct?
Yes.
So their cost,
If they close on time, they get all of that, the 2.25 and the 1 million, yes.
so their cost is essentially zero.
Pardon me?
Their cost is essentially zero if they close on the property.
All right, I'll let Katie answer those questions for you.
Okay.
Thank you, Gina.
All right, thanks.
Presentation by the applicant, please.
Hi, good afternoon. Katie Cole with the law firm of Hill Ward Henderson, representing the applicant. I'll just open with a few words and then be happy to respond to your questions because Gina gave a very thorough overview, so we won't waste your time doing that again. As staff indicated, last March in 2023, the developers collectively for the project went to the city and showed all of their cost estimations that had been going on during the due diligence period. So once the referendum was passed in November, By January, the scheme for the development was complete for the City Hall site, and it included 525 units, which was contemplated in the original development agreement of between 500 and 600 units, and the commercial space. Those cost estimates were entirely untenable based on what the financing schemes were. Gotham went to the city last March to show that information and all of those cost estimates from two different contractors. The city, as indicated, engaged HR&A to look at all of those cost estimates from the two contractors, as well as significant insurance information and interest rate information that had been provided by the financing companies. That report's included in your documents and was issued in October of 2023. At that point, the developers entered into the negotiations with the city and came up with a revised purchase agreement. In February of 2024, the City Council approved the Fourth Amendment to the contract for purchase of real property. And within that contract, there are conditions precedent to the buyers and sellers' obligations to cure. Those conditions precedent to closing specify the 12 changes to the development agreement that you're seeing today. So these were negotiated last fall and incorporated into the purchase and sale agreement that was approved in February. Since February, the teams worked very hard on the conceptual plans to bring those back in a format that could be added to the development agreement for presentation and for your consideration today. So with respect to a couple of questions, Mr. Harcourt, with respect to the two towers, the podium won't accommodate a second tower in the future. Unfortunately, that was something that was looked at sincerely by the team. It also would have required, well, candidly, some of the phasing issues, some of the allocation of density, a lot of other things went into the consideration to, as quickly as possible, introduce rental housing into the downtown core. With respect to Mr. Hupp's question, I think one of the significant considerations from both the developer and the city is the restricted use. And this is required to be multifamily rental housing. It cannot be for sale housing, cannot be transient housing on the City Hall site. And so with the rental housing restriction, the original appraisals did not consider rental the highest and best use, and those appraisals were very high. When the appraisers then considered the restrictive covenants with respect to rental housing, that was the difference. And then candidly, just the lack of new rental product in downtown caused the city to consider the CRA grants. So the CRA in March also approved the allocation of those dollars in its budget moving forward. So with that, I did want to point out the FAR looks very low. We won't get into the details as to the mixed use calculation and how that works, but I want to assure you that absent a mixed use calculation, this is a significant building. It's quite large in size, right at about the 4.0 FAR that this code contemplates. It's because of the mixed use calculation that the majority of it is allocated to the residential, which we present as a density as compared to the FAR. So with that, happy to answer other questions. We also have Mr. D'Annunzio from the D'Annunzio Group who is here with us, our Gotham clients. We thought they were going to be able to participate online, but unfortunately could not do that, so they are watching, and I'm sure texting me if I misspeak. And then Ishvan Petrokrans from Behar Petrokrans, the architect of record, is also here to answer any questions. So with that, happy to respond.
Any additional questions at this time? I think we'll thank you, Katie.
Okay,
Yeah.
thank you.
We'll now open this to comments by the public. If there are any, please come forward, 3 minutes per person if there's any comments. Please state your name.
Hi. My name is Masood Rafi,
My question has to do with the parking. All of the presentation that I saw, there wasn't any picture that shows actually what is above ground. I live in 100 Pierce condominium, which I heard that's gonna be view towards the Pierce Street. So I'd like to see more of that, what it is, and actually a copy of the presentation would be helpful if you have it available. That's all.
See if we can get a picture of that.
I don't have it in color.
Mr. Chairman, members of the board, my name is Frank Catanaccio, C-A-T-E-N-A-C-C-I-O. I'm a resident of 100 Pierce Street. I just wanted to say, when you look at this proposal, look at the fact that you are adding 400 vehicles, plus whatever transient vehicles you have out there. I would encourage every member of this board to sit out here on a Friday or a Saturday and try to traverse Osceola and Fort Harrison, trying to go east-west. You're always going to find some jerk who's going to park right in the middle because he cannot continue going south, and you get a roadblock. It happens at both locations. You need a very intensive traffic study to figure out how you are going to move that many vehicles in such a limited amount of space. You're going to have some very angry people at 100 Pierce Street if it takes us a half an hour to go from Myrtle to our house on a Friday or Saturday night. Be happy to answer any questions of the board if you have them. Ladies and gentlemen, I thank you.
Thank you. Is there anybody else from the public? Seeing none, were you able to?
Katie has the color
Okay,
elevation.
okay. Any closing remarks by the Planning and Development? Katie, closing by the applicant.
I don't know if you were looking for the color elevations of the proposed, is this what you were looking for, the parking?
Also show along Osceola. I mean, excuse me.
This is
Pierce
the view
Street.
from Coachman Park,
Okay.
and this is the view from Osceola,
Could you point out the parking area?
It's behind.
or the parking area,
Yeah.
you can't see it.
Okay.
Intentionally. So this is the corner of Pierce and Osceola,
All right.
and here's the drop-off area at Osceola. I showed it, it's at the corner. And then there's the Duke easement, the commercial area.
That's the
along the
commercial
Duke
area?
easement.
Right.
And I have one more. I don't have the one you're looking for. Oh, and there you go.
I apologize, I didn't bring a color, but this is the parking garage along Osceola, and that same treatment is carried around along to the park as well. This treatment goes around and is the same along the park.
So with that, we respectfully request your approval, happy to answer any, or your recommendation of approval, and happy to answer.
Just before I close it, does anybody have any questions at this time? The only thing I would recommend, I mean, and we have a great deal of landscaping, but the surface area parking is substantial, and I know we have certain requirements in landscaping, and it might not be needed as far as requirements on the landscaping side with our parking spaces that are here. But if there
There's
was,
no, I'm sorry, there's no surface parking. Where?
there is no surface parking.
It's just a drop-off.
It's just the drop-off?
Okay, got you.
I didn't mean to totally interrupt, but I wanted to be sure I knew where you were looking before.
Thank you. No,
Okay.
appreciate the clarification. Is there any?
On those CRA grants, is there any further definition on what commencement of construction means, or any kind of milestones that are needed to achieve? Or is that a permit, or how is that defined?
Commencement of construction is the first activity on the first permit issued, I believe, is what, it's not defined in the agreement, but that was the conversation. So whether it was clearing and grubbing and, you know, moving something on site.
Is that mobilization?
It was not vertical.
Is that considered mobilization?
I think that's a discussion that.
Clearing and grubbing, you'd be mobilized.
I would think it would be
I can assure
site
you that
work.
once a $300 million project is financed, there was great motivation to move and build quickly.
I just had a question on the rentals. Is it all going to be regular rentals, or is there a percentage where it's going to be more affordable rentals, or?
Sure, it's all market rate by definition. That was what the city had asked for in its request for proposals.
Okay, so whatever the going rate is, those 400 units will rent.
Yes. There's an option in the developers could elect to include up to 10%, so 40 affordable units if they desired. But the city's desire was to have market rate there.
Any other questions? Well, this is a big project to the city. I think at this point, we'll just close the public hearing and discussion and vote by the board. Obviously, this is a big project within the city itself, and I know there's a lot of eyes on it, and for a city to be rejuvenated downtown, as we've all been waiting for years and years that have lived here. I mean, the residential is the biggest component, I think, to get going. So, I mean, it's welcomed. I can't wait for you to get started. I hear the concerns of the residents that are there, and I think they're addressed from best that we can see. Other than that, if there's any other comments, do I have a motion?
I'll move to recommend approval of this item based on the findings of fact, conclusions of law, and the staff report.
Is there a second?
Second.
Before you vote on that, you had a request.
I'm
for
sorry.
an approval.
Together with the memorandum of April 15th change.
Thank you.
Thanks for catching me on that.
Second.
All those in favor? Aye. Opposed? Motion carries. Thank you. Sorry, this planning director, do we have any other items?
Did not, thank you.
Well, I thank everybody for April. This meeting is adjourned.